Kevin Remney, talking from Microsoft, going to talk about Bash on Windows, on Ubuntu on Windows.
Right.
So go ahead, take it away.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you all for allowing me to come in and kind of interlope here a little bit, because, you know, it was still kind of a weird thing, even to me, that a Microsoft guy would be speaking at a Linux group. But you may have heard, and I've got a sticker on my Surface here that says it, so it must be so, that Microsoft does love Linux. And we are now the #1 contributor to open source according to GitHub in the world. We are now the largest Linux support organization. We are the largest contributor to open source projects, such as Linux itself, let alone all the tooling and other pieces. Because we know where people are, we know what people are wanting to do, and in support of developers, it became very apparent that there's a lot of developers that are sticking with their Macs, they're sticking with their Linux systems because there's the tools that they know and love and trust running on those systems. So Microsoft decided and surprised the world by putting Linux essentially on Windows. And you're going to see that it is actual Ubuntu Linux. There is actual mapping of calls from native binaries that you download just as you would download to any typical system in Bash. You download them to your system and you run them just as you would any other. So I'm going to kind of introduce you to this idea of this subsystem running on Windows. You know, how it kind of works, what the architecture looks like a little bit. I'll probably skip through the architecture piece fairly quickly because you can have the slides later. In fact, I should probably point out this link here, aka.ms/BOUOW for Bash on Ubuntu on Windows. You'll be able to find these slides there. So go ahead and grab the slides if you like. There's some good resources at the end too that you may want to take advantage of. All right, and of course I caught a cold on the plane too. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm from Minneapolis. I'm in town for a couple of different events going on. It's kind of a weird road warrior week for me because I go straight to Kansas City on Thursday, then Milwaukee on Friday. A lot of things going on. But again, thank you so much for having me here. So we're going to talk about the subsystem for Linux, WSL. We'll talk about how to get it installed. So I'll show you where that's found in Windows 10 and the anniversary update. We'll talk about then this thing called Bash, and I probably don't have to go into a lot of details on how it works because you, I think, already know. But we'll show you some of the things you can do, and maybe some surprising things that you can do with this now Linux subsystem running on Windows. And we'll also talk a little bit and show some examples of using Bash in your developer workflows. So some ways you can interact and integrate with Bash, but still use tools on Windows and things like Visual Studio Code, things like connecting up easily to GitHub. I will describe, unfortunately I haven't been able to get this demo to work, but I'll describe a way to actually integrate it into an automatic publishing of code to an Azure website. All things that we can do now that we have this tooling available and the benefit of having this tooling available on Windows. So what is this subsystem for Linux? The origins of this really start a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, having to do with NT. When Microsoft built the NT kernel and the NT subsystems, they built it in such a way that it could be extended, that people could actually build additional pieces to it that could interpret instructions and actually operate even in the same environment alongside others. So things like POSIX and OS2 and of course the Win32 subsystem. And out of that grew this Unix-based application support. So we had a subsystem for Unix-based applications. It had a POSIX user mode APIs, it had NT constructs. The idea was that you could easily port your Unix applications. Now notice I didn't say you could run them natively. I just said you could port them, which means, yeah, you have to recompile them. But it's a way to bring an application very quickly, or was at that time very quickly into that environment. Along with that, we started kind of considering, well, how can we make this really efficient, really lightweight, very fast performant with regard to launching and supporting other systems. And so we had this Pico process concept that we came up with, and Pico drivers, and part of this Drawbridge project. Now, born out of that, we developed then eventually this subsystem for Linux. Now, all the other pieces kind of went away, but that the engine was still there and still carries on even in today in Windows 10. This native Linux ELF binaries being able to run on Windows. So we're actually running the real Linux tool. We're actually running the real Linux binaries. We're interpreting and taking those calls, and where they're appropriate, we'll map them to Windows calls for working with the environment. Where they're not available in a direct mapping, we'll create the functionality, but in a real sense, this is true Linux, and it's by this support of Canonical and their Ubuntu distribution that we're able to do this. So really good partners with Canonical in this. So it has a user mode. Basically, there's a session manager that runs in this place. The Pico drivers are there, the LXSS and LXcore.sys. And then we have this Pico process, again, carrying it forward, that now is hosting /bin/bash. Here's a little diagram showing how the pieces relate. Again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time trying to describe a picture to you, because a picture can take more words than I can actually get out right now. But you, like I said, can have these slides available. Now, the file system is kind of an interesting thing, because the Linux file system is fairly different than a Windows system. So we had to come up with two different, really, subsystems that supported the same file system, but supported it in a way that made sense for the environment that you were in. So essentially, you have the full fidelity of Linux file system, and I'll show you when we get into the demonstration that you have a home folder, you have an old file structure that is what you expect it to be with regard to what's installed in Ubuntu. But you also have the ability to navigate to the Windows file system, even when you're in Bash. So you can actually go to a mounted location, and that actually is your C drive, and you'll see that. Similarly, when you're in the Windows system, you can navigate to the systems under the app data folder to find your folders there that are actually the Linux folders. Now you have to kind of tread lightly, because working with files or interacting with files in both directions, some tricks there that I don't think they've quite worked out all correctly yet, but you know, we're getting there. I should probably also mention too, this is still in beta. This is a preview capability. Even though it's in the most recent release of Windows 10, the anniversary update, 1607, this capability is getting better every month. We're fixing more things. Toward the end of the talk today, I will actually give you some links and some resources where you can actually contribute. So if you found something that doesn't work, you can actually go and talk with the community. And the folks that are the program managers for this would love to get your feedback. But how do we do this dual file system thing? Well, we've got evolfs and we've got drivefs. evolfs is going to be for the sake of is what's driving the Linux subsystem, the file system, and the drivefs is for the sake of Windows. Both running side by side. So the result, as I mentioned, and as we're pleased to talk about, Unix and Linux tools now run directly on Windows. All the tools that you're familiar with and use, as you see a list here, are going to run natively in this Bash environment. And they are real. They're not VMs. They're on Windows. They're in Windows together. So a couple slides here that describe how to actually install this. I'm not going to talk through these slides. You can get these later. I'm going to show you where that's found in Windows, so I'll just skip over these. And but importantly too, there's ways to do it the GUI, of course, in Windows, but there's also the ability to use PowerShell. So there's a simple PowerShell command that can enable this capability for your Windows system. Now your Windows system does have to be running 64-bit. It does have to have the, does it stay on here? There's some requirements with regard to the processor, so it has to have, 64-bit and the OS as well. I don't think it requires virtualization. It doesn't, because it's not virtualization. So, once you have things configured, I'll show you again how that's configured, all you need to do is go to a command prompt, or and you go to an administrative command prompt, or go to PowerShell, and simply run bash. And the first thing that will happen is it'll say, you're going to be installing this, you want to make sure you want to do this, and yes you do. It pulls down the files, it prompts you for a user, so you're creating a new user with a password, and you're good to go for bash on Ubuntu on Windows. So now it's like an opportunity to actually show some of this off. And while this build slide is building up, I forgot to get my notes out because I got a lot of stuff I want to show you and I don't want to forget anything. It's the worst thing when you get done with a presentation, you think, oh, that went really well, except I forgot this whole big piece of efficiencies. All right. Okay. So I'm going to actually run this from a virtual machine. I've kind of screwed up my local workstation pretty royally, so I need to rebuild it. But I have a virtual machine running Windows 10. And again, this does not require it to be a virtual machine. This could be running a native system. I'm just doing this for the sake of having a clean, non-Microsoft production connected domain environment. This is a pretty fresh install of Windows. All I've done is install a couple of things you might recognize up on the left, and also, of course, the subsystem for Linux. So if I go into programs and features, and I look at the turn Windows features on and off, this is where the first thing I'm going to see that I configured, and that was to enable the Windows Subsystem for Linux. Again, note the beta tag on that. The next thing I did, in Update and Security, under Windows Settings, is this, no, this is not the one. Yes, it is. Okay. Does require, I've mentioned I'm doing a bunch of presentations this week, and my presentations and demos are all mixed up in my head right now. You do have to enable developer mode in Windows also. And that's because this is a beta system, and also because we really do think that it is developers that are going to take the best advantage of this, are really going to want this. So you enable developer mode, you've turned on the Windows Subsystem for Linux, and then, as I mentioned, all you have to do is go to a command prompt, or after you actually do that, you actually get another shortcut to bash on Ubuntu on Windows. But here it is. Is that kind of small? Is that visible? You can see it okay? Okay.
It's a little small.
Let's go bigger. Let's see if we can do it without getting too far off the screen here. A little bit better? We'll go with that. All right, so what am I running? Well, I'm running Ubuntu. So it tells me I'm running Trusty 14.04.5. If I look at the file system, right now I'm in my home folder, so it was empty when I started out. I've added some things for the sake of some demos. But if I go to root, I see the things that you would expect.
Can you cat your proc/version file?
Say what again?
Cat.
And by the way, I should mention, I'm not a Linux guru. You guys,
Yeah.
every one of you could Linux circles around me.
I just want to see what it tells us about the kernel. So cat space /proc/version.
Okay.
There's a couple of words that
You don't normally see
You don't
that.
see every day?
we're not really very comfortable with. Some of us aren't.
Is that any
I see
different
people
than
squirming in
uname
the
-a?
Yeah.
All right.
Is that any
So-
different than uname -a?
Yeah.
What was that? Very good.
I guess similar.
So let's again, the file system is basically the file system you expect. CD will bring me back to my home. Now, if I do a CD mntc users,
Oh, okay.
There we go.
So it mounts your Windows system.
So
yeah,
there's your Windows file systems,
yep, there's my documents.
documents, yeah.
It's basically my documents folder. You can, of course, and these are just silly Linux tricks, but if you want to install some of the more common fun little tools like Fortune, you just do the sudo apt-get install, and then find the files you want.
That's what's pretty cool. You've got access to the app repository.
Yeah, instead of running Fortune, more importantly, I think, is probably showing you that it is going to update my system. Of course, the first time I try to use sudo ID password. But it's online. It's pulling from the places you'd expect it to. Hopefully my connection is still there.
And this is a Microsoft Surface?
I'm running on a Surface, yeah. Surface Pro 4, it's got 8 gig of memory. I've got the i7, so it's a nicer one. And I've got Hyper-V enabled in Windows 10, and so that's when I'm running the Windows 10 virtual machine. And the virtual machine, I've just given it 2 gig. And interestingly, I've enabled, although it's not required for this, I've enabled nested virtualization in Hyper-V as well. I have some Docker sessions that I do, and then you need to have Hyper-V for Docker.
So you're connecting to the official Ubuntu repositories. Then?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, you're getting the binaries.
It's the same repositories I would connect to with
Absolutely.
my Ubuntu box.
Yep.
If you run 1404.
Which I am.
Okay.
You have no real enemies. Good, okay. Another silly trick, of course. Now the cow say, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just install these things just for fun. They're really important old school tools that my friends in college showed me how to use. Oh, I don't have the screen big enough to shoot. It's a problem with having larger font, and won't let me do that. That's all right.
I see that it's having the problem that between the different line ending characters between Linux and Windows. Because Unix
Yeah.
uses a
Yeah, the
line
CRL.
feed and Windows
Yeah,
uses a
that's one
line
of the things
feed
I've seen
carriage
too, is
return.
You take a text file from one to the other, and you find they're just a big long stream of text. So we can all explore the dungeon and die.
So just by enabling it and running it the first time, how much of Linux do you have? Is it just a base install with, you got vim and grep and sed and
Yeah. Give me another command. I'm going to
Vim.
go full
Vim.
send. Vim? Oh, yeah. I've been using Vim. Although my keyboard is not behaving very now.
SETI space minus, yeah, SETI.
What's the reset command? That's YC.
Yeah, SETI. Thanks.
Okay. So I'm sorry, yeah, Vim. In fact, let me, I've got a little script here that just
Yeah.
launches something. We'll launch in a minute here.
Well, if you could give your presentation on that.
Sure, why not?
Vim minus version,
Should be fairly
and
current.
scroll up a little.
Well, it's whatever ships in 14.4, right?
7.4.
Well, how does it
So
see
I just leave my
hardware?
machine up here, you know.
I'm good,
So
thanks.
how does it see hardware and things? So if you want to do like a if config, you'd see what the network
Yeah.
looks like and,
Yeah, so ifconfig.
Was it?
ifconfig, all one word.
Yeah, Ubuntu still supports that.
Oh, sudo space
Oh, yeah.
ifconfig.
Try doing an IP space ADDR.
Yeah, do that.
IP space.
ADDR.
Eh,
Huh?
Some issues reaching like the network, you know.
Yeah, I think, yeah, when I tried to do the update, I think it was something on there too.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's my connection here or what, but, okay, other things we can do, you probably saw this on my desktop, but I've installed some X Windows, X servers, and I've got Xming here. And I'm gonna launch that, and we'll actually capture that in a second, but I've installed, kind of fun little utilities like, do nothing noise. But they're kind of fun. But if I wanted to, I can actually, and now, I do that again, it's actually opening another window. So that tells me I've got some graphics capabilities here that I might want to take advantage of. Like X
Yeah.
Calc.
How about X gears?
X gears.
Like the GNOME.
I haven't installed that yet. I have installed it. I don't think it's on
There's
this.
no reason it shouldn't run, other than it's not installed.
Yeah, that's part of it.
There's nothing special about it.
It was a long install, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was able to get that working just fine. Yeah, actually, with this is a silly example of this, but what it's pointing out is that you have this ability to run other, other systems with full graphics capabilities. I haven't done this. I take it back. I did it successfully one time. I installed a Linux desktop. There are good instructions out there how to actually get those to work on this as well. So you could actually use that with one of these X Windows servers, X servers to have a Linux desktop here. In fact, I do have. Quake install. So if you want to do a single-player game, this is just the shareware version. But no, so you can get some good graphics capabilities.
Is the performance okay?
Yeah, you know, the window's pretty small, look, I'm in the lava right now. My mouse is drifting down my mouse
Yeah.
pad too, as I'm on a slant here. That one. All right, so we'll come back to this in a little bit here. I want to talk a little bit more about the capabilities for developers. No virtual machines were harmed in the making of this demo.
Was that an OpenGL application, that Quake?
I'm not sure if that one did. I think, yeah, no, I take it back. I think yes, it is.
Because Microsoft has the DirectX, right?
Right.
So
you had to
like
get,
a linkage?
OpenGL. Again, I don't know how that, I didn't actually write these demos, I will say also. I got a guy named Paul DeCarlo, who's a good friend of mine, a coworker down in the Houston area. He's gonna get some props at the end of this slide deck, because his resources are excellent. And, but he built these demos for me, so what did we just see here? Native tools, pulled from the common repositories. On Windows, now I didn't actually show off some of the developer tools yet, we'll come back to those in a second. Again, it's simply a feature of the Windows kernel now, so it's another, that POSIX subsystem is the ability to run these native binaries. So we have a Linux compatible syscall here. Those applications don't know or care that they're actually running on a subsystem that's based in Windows. So what works and what doesn't? This is, again, as I mentioned, a preview capability. So you're going to find some things that work and you're going to find some things that don't work. There are some gaps still there. There's a really good list, and I've got a link in this slide deck that you can actually go to see what the community has said and what the feedback is and the different pieces that are working well, or maybe some workarounds in some areas, and so on. You know, a lot of the things do work well in testing, trademark. Work well in testing means your mileage may vary, right? So be aware, because this is still beta capability. And you saw a couple of examples. But there's some things that you should be aware of. NPM has some issues now. I've actually had okay luck with it. Some things I've tried to install that required it, though, required older legacy code to be installed in its place. And so you had to kind of be careful which versions you were getting installed. These are untested scenarios, but we want you to test them. We sincerely hope that you will try this out and give your feedback to the community. This is the list of that's being maintained on behalf of these different scenarios. And again, you don't have to write this link down. I've got a much easier link, and I showed it at the beginning. I'll show it again at the end, where you can get these slides and you can get that URL. So I'm a developer. How am I going to use this? Well, networking tools work right out of the box. So if you're doing any troubleshooting or testing of your applications or configurations across machines, the common tools are there for you: curl, whois, nslookup, dig. You have built-in SSH support. You can enable SSH on behalf of your subsystem and actually connect to it. Another teammate of mine, Jessica Dean, on the West Coast, has actually a really great blog post. I'll give her some props as well. You'll see a link to her post on how to get her Mac connected to her Windows machine and actually develop against it, but from her Mac across the network. The integration with Visual Studio Code is also there. I'll show you that you can actually work with the shell, work with Bash, while you're in the editor. So you can actually use that as a terminal at the bottom of the screen when you're using VS Code on Windows. Easy instructions there on how to get it set up, but I'll actually show you how that's done. Visual Studio also supports the integrated terminal. So let's go ahead and show off some of this. Now I have so back to my virtual machine here. Don't need this anymore. Okay. So I'm in my home directory. Notice I've got a number of folders that just have simple little examples. So I'll look at my C++ directory here. I got one little hello.cpp. I've installed the developer essential tools. That's just a little C++ hello world program. If I run it, hello world. Yay. Let's do another one. hello world looks like in Ruby. Sure enough, it runs. What else did I have here? Print hello world, and we'll see. Yep, that works. .NET. Hey, .NET Core. Well, I'll confess this is actually broken right now in my environment here. Again, Paul DeGrello has some good examples that he's recorded, put online. But if you have the .NET Core installed here, you just basically, right now my folder is empty here. All I have to do is say .NET New, and it's going to create an empty project for me. I'm not sure if the next piece is going to work because I happen to be having network issues, but there's a couple basic pieces. And then it would be .NET Store to pull down from what's required for the project. And then .NET Run should compile and run a hello world. And it seems to compile okay, but it comes up and fails, and I'm not sure why. So okay, that part is broken. But that's, if you are interested in getting into .NET on Ubuntu or .NET Core, that's something you can work on. Let's open up Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is a, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, is a open source editor. It's an open source tool. Runs on, or was actually built for running on Mac, running on Linux, running on Windows. It is actually built in TypeScript, so you can get the source code, you can actually work with it. And it's a pretty powerful tool. It integrates with GitHub really nicely, so you can actually work with local Git repositories and commit changes up to your own public repository or private repositories. And it also has the ability to run a shell. Now, if I use the control tick mark, it opens up the terminal, and I happen to have chosen Bash as my default terminal. So there I am in my Kevin folder under users. Now, how do I do that? Well, if you go into File and Preferences and User Settings in Visual Studio Code, you have this settings.json file that you can edit. And I've added a couple of different examples here. One is just simply going to a Windows command prompt as the terminal. One is for PowerShell, and then the one I don't have commented out is right here. It's actually running the Bash. So that's how you can do that integration.
What's the relationship between, I'm not familiar with this open source version of Visual Studio. What's the relation between this and the regular Visual Studio?
And the full Visual Studio?
Yeah.
The benefit of this is that it runs on multiple platforms, that it is truly open source completely. And it's more simple, I guess, if you just really want to do some basic coding, and you don't necessarily need all the bells and whistles that are Visual Studio. Although Visual Studio is pretty powerful, and there's a free community version that's full featured. So. But honestly, a Visual Studio installation, how many of you have installed Visual Studio? Okay, it's a big install, right? I mean, sometimes it's much more than me. And I have installed, but I'm still learning it. So I'm an IT pro by nature, so that's why some of this development stuff is just coming back to me, because it was like 20 years ago I was a developer. All right, so that's how you can do that integration here. Let's actually do some other stuff here. I could do this from this shell here too, but I'm going to go ahead and close this and do a couple more things from the command line here. I happen to have, where is it? So I've got a little app here, JavaScript app, and so it's going to do. It's basically going to set up a server, so it's really going to quickly set up a web server, and then it'll show me the port that it's running on and listening on. So if I do, there we go. So it's listening on port 8000. So I can do a local host.
Colon 8000.
and hello world. So it responded as the code said it should. In fact, not only is it listening there, but it's also listening in my browser. So if I go here,
You run a node in the Ubuntu subsystem.
yeah, but there you can see the little tiny text up at the top.
Yeah.
All right. Azure. The Azure command line interface, Azure CLI is also cross-platform tooling. So you can run that in Windows. You can also run that in Linux, which means you can run it on the Windows Subsystem Linux. If I just type Azure here, it will wake up and it'll show me that it's alive and well. There it is. Let's see if I can get some of this next piece of the demo to work. There's an ending piece that I wanted to. The goal with this piece of it was to build a Jekyll web application, to have it, save it, or integrate with GitHub, and then when I make a change, also connect it to Azure so that it publishes to my website that I've connected it to. Now the piece that doesn't work for me right now is that last bit about connecting it to Azure. But I can show you how simple it is to set up, and in fact we can do this with Jekyll, having installed that on the system here. So I'm going to go back to my C drive. And you know, it's funny too, because I'm still in Linux, I can't type users because it doesn't recognize that, right? Windows wouldn't have a problem with that. It has to be capital U. And I'm going to actually clone a repository. So I've got Git installed, and I've set up an empty repository on my GitHub location just for the sake of this Jekyll demo. So I'm going to clone it here. So here's it's basically a README and a git ignore file. So it's got it's synchronized. So it's basically an empty repository in GitHub. All right, let's do a couple things. Actually, you know what? I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code one more time too, and navigate to that folder just to kind of show off some of the integration with GitHub as well. So if I let's see, not open file, it's in the folder. So here in Visual Studio Code, I'm looking at that Jekyll demo folder. So I see the git ignore, I see the README. If I want to edit the README, I can do that here. What's going to be more interesting is you'll see the file show up after I actually create the Jekyll app. It's hard to type at a slant when you have this thing here. Now, because I have content in this folder, I have to do a force. Put it right here. There we go. All right, so I'm going to edit something quick here. There's the files. I'm going to edit this config file and change the title of my web app here to something all right. I know you're not with the library, but I just happen to be here. Anyway, that's what I'm going to say. So let's save that and go back to here and actually serve this up. And it's telling me it's listening on port 4000. So if I go in the browser, one I've done before. Nope. There it is, Farmington Library Linux. Those are awesome. So now what I would do, a couple things. First of all, notice that since those files were created, and I also made an edit as well, notice the integration to GitHub in Visual Studio Code. I could very easily just select these, commit them to my local repository, and then I could also push these up, push it up from here to my GitHub repository as well. So that's nice. We can do that all from here as well as from the command line. The piece that that's really all that I have that's working with this demo. If I do, let's see. Oh, I don't have that piece here. What I would want to do, as I mentioned, is to actually make a connection to Azure, and I could use an Azure command line tool. So the Azure command line is installed here. I could create a new site. I could then tell GitHub also connect to that as a destination, so that whenever there was a check-in, actually a commit up to public repositories, it would not only put it up in GitHub online, but it will also put it into my Azure website, and I could actually see changes live, available to the world on whatever my domain name is, Azure websites, whatever. So, piece I want to get working before I do this demo yet again on Friday. All right, so the call to action. We do need your help. I mentioned this earlier, but we sincerely want you to try this out, kick the tires. Of all the communities in the world, you guys are the ones that are most valuable to us right now with regard to making sure that this works well for you and everyone like you. So do kick the tires for us. This again arrived in the Windows 10 anniversary update, so it was available as of July, actually early August. It actually has been around a little bit longer, so there was fast ring builds that had it available earlier on, but now it's live there, still in beta. Please tell us what's broken. Please tell us what works. Give us suggestions if you have some things that you'd like changed or that should work a different way. We really want to hear about it. You can also share your experiences with the community as well, and not just in the resources that I'm providing here, but certainly anytime you blog about it, tweet about it, speak about it. You know, anything that you put online certainly is searchable, and we all benefit from being able to find your working with us as well online. So user voice, if you go to aka.ms/winbashuv for Windows Bash user voice, you can give your ideas there. You can ask the product team about what's going on. Any issues you have, we have a GitHub repository for that as well. And there's the link there. Some great blogs from the Microsoft team that are putting this together, the WSL blog, as well as the console and command line blog. And then Twitter, there's a guy, Richard Turner, who is the guy. I mean, he's the one who's responsible for this ultimately. So he is giving a lot of updates on Twitter. Follow him closely, tweet him, ask him questions. He'll get back to you quickly. Some more resources to help you get started. Forget about this, my blog and my Facebook page. Okay, you can connect to those if you like. But more importantly on this page is the resources from my friends Paul DiCarlo and Jessica D. They're awesome. They know this stuff backwards and forwards. Jessica was a long-time Linux user. Whoops, auto advance. So these links will get you to, for example, how to deploy that Jekyll static blog to Azure, how he got that configured to work properly that I couldn't, and also how if you're curious about running Quake on Ubuntu, there's a couple steps you have to do in a script to run, but it's pretty doable. And then also Jessica has a really good resource as well on how to get started with Bash on Windows 10. And that's all I have. Again, here's that link that you should write down, aka.ms/BOUOW. It doesn't have to be capitalized like that, but that will get you to my OneDrive where I put the slides for. Any questions, comments, curiosities, things we want to try?
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
I know you can run SSH under the Windows Ubuntu Subsystem. Long before we heard about this, Microsoft had made an announcement about they were going to be importing or incorporating OpenSSH into Windows. Is that still happening? Do you know anything about that? Or is this what they ended up doing?
Well, no, I don't think this is what that was. I think that was a rumor that it's still a rumor. And unfortunately, I don't have any more information about it for you.
I don't know if it's supported yet, but it works. I've got it running.
Do you have OpenSSH?
Yeah, I don't know if it's official, but there is I think it's on GitHub. They download it and.
But is it from Microsoft?
Yeah,
or?
from Microsoft.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Because that to me seems like a very powerful.
Yes.
But you want to, have some fun playing around, look around GitHub for some of the stuff Microsoft's doing. That we haven't actually even talked about, we're just still building it, and we're doing it in the full view of the community. It's a different world. And you can contribute, which is also awesome. Yeah,
So how is this licensed? Can I just download this and install it?
yeah, it's just in Windows, there's no additional license for this. Yep.
Yeah, you said you could try something. Run DMIB code and pipe the output through more.
DMI, decode,
That's it exactly. Yep.
and,
Pipe it through more, because it's gonna be like 30 or 40 pages long.
okay.
If you have access to anything.
Oh, wait, is this a sudo?
Yeah.
No, we put it-
So an illustrative pretty much. You can see it.
So there's no dev now.
Yeah.
But, try demessage, D-M-E-S-G.
Nope.
You don't really have a Linux kernel there, so
Right.
you can't really talk from the kernel. How about,
But these are things that you can tell, the team.
I can give you a ton of commands.
Yeah.
Try a
I've heard-
sudo,
Well, send them to me, I'll
I've heard
forward them on.
PS works.
try, oh, sorry?
I've heard PS works.
Yeah, try top.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it just kind of, yeah, there's not a kernel, there's not a bunch of the daemons that, normally are in.
Type in PS space minus EAF.
It's EAF.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just about that. How about sudo space ls USB?
I'm gonna try to break
Yeah,
the
we
system.
can't, no, we just, we can't see what
Let's
kind
do
of
it, come
USB
on.
device it is.
This is a virtual machine, I can restore this anytime.
Or LSPCI, it's just to see, we probably don't have access to the PCI bus, like sudo space LSPCI.
LSPCI.
Yeah. Yeah, these are all kernel things.
Yeah.
Could you try the DMIB code? Just put in the full path, which is /usr/sbin/DMIB
I
code.
think it complained because it couldn't get to
You
dev
couldn't get
mem.
admin.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, there's no dev mem.
yeah. Yeah, before it was saying the path that it wasn't
Well,
found.
the first time, yeah.
Second time it's like that.
When he did it with sudo, he still couldn't get to dev mem. So do an ls on /dev. Let's see what kind of devices we do have out there. Not much.
Basically, I think what you should view this is not like a full-blown Linux that you have,
Sure.
but exactly what they said in slide 1 or 2, it's a subsystem.
It's user space.
And
Yeah,
yes,
user
and
space.
in that subsystem, only the minimalist devices are there for the developer to work.
Sure.
Compile and stuff like that, and test. But I guess a lot of us have a sysadmin inside of us, so we like to, touch the hardware
Yeah,
and devices. But then, because it's a
Okay.
subsystem by definition, this is all you'll get.
Very
How
well
about
said.
LSBLK?
LS, I'm sorry?
LSBLK.
VLK?
No, B as in boy. B as in boy.
Yes, LSB.
No block device.
Block devices, yeah. There aren't any.
There should be because all hard drives are block devices.
There's no hard drive.
Do a DF space minus HT. Capital T, sorry.
DF dash HT?
Yep.
That's just file systems, that's not bad.
I'm looking for the device names. There are none, okay.
Yeah, so it's all a subsystem
Sure.
and internally mounted.
Sure.
Jim, you had asked about proc systems. Can you see all the stuff? what-
Yeah, LS,
proc?
do ls on /proc.
There are the yellow
CPU info, yeah. Yeah, do a cat on CPU /proc/CPU info. So that's, telling us about the CPU, yeah.
So LS CPU should work then too.
LS CPU?
Is that just one,
Yeah.
yeah?
So what about if you, like if you're using a scripting language like Python, and, you know, because it'd be nice to have full POSIX functionality. I mean, is the intent that if you're gonna do like socket programming or like POSIX system calls, or should that work? Or is it just more like, just too
Well, I think the goal is to make it work, yeah. Any kind of development should be a platform for that.
The socket programming is fairly generic. That should just-
Yeah.
I would expect that to work, especially if they're, you know, the tools you mentioned for networking are there, so.
I mean, if you get into, like, if you get into socket programming, then you're getting into threading or event loops, which typically require kernels, so that's why I was curious, but the goal is to support that.
You know, I don't know what the goal is, but it sounds like we're moving in that direction.
Yeah.
Certainly it makes sense.
It supports Node, which is event driven and.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Back here, yeah.
Put the jobs in the background?
Yeah, you're doing that, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, feel free to pass on this, but what I'm wondering, when these files are saved from inside Ubuntu to the C drive where it's mounted, does it take on permissions based on the parent directory, or does it take on permissions based on the UMask?
Right now, you actually have more access to both file systems from Bash than you do from Windows. From Windows, you're somewhat limited, and you can't, and I think probably for a good reason. You start messing with files, you mess with permissions, so I've actually done this. I tried to save a file to a folder I knew it should save there, it's a text file, and it comes up as garbage, and in fact, it even totally corrupted the folder I was putting in. So you gotta, that part of it, you gotta be careful coming at it from the Windows point of view. So if I do that, I will show you where it's at, but again, this is not something that you should do regularly. Let's see, it's in, There's, I think this is right. Yeah. So there's your bash.
Which directory is that? What directory is that you're in?
Well, that's in, it's in the, your profile folder, app data, local, and then it's a very well hidden folder that you can't even see when you're showing hidden folders, called LXSS, so you have to know the name.
Yeah. And that's your Linux boxes.
Right. And so there's my, these are my, that's my home folder, there's all that stuff, the Jekyll stuff I created. There's
Now,
that
is this
.NET
using
folder.
the users in Windows for the Bash user, or is it?
You create a new user, so you're creating a new user for Bash. When you set the system up and first install it, you are being asked, okay, what's the username you want to use, what's the password?
Okay, and you use user, add other users, and so
Yeah.
on.
Yep. Yeah, you can do that. So I've opened up a file that was the C# file that was in that Jekyll application using Visual Studio Code. So it's at that path. But if I'm pretty sure that if I make any modifications to this and save it, I'll totally screw up that folder. So tread carefully.
I was a few minutes late, maybe you touched on this, but what is Microsoft's vision for this product?
Microsoft's vision for, well, a couple things. It's just one, I think actually relatively small example, because I think we're doing much bigger things in the cloud with regard to supporting open source and open source projects, open source, and even companies that are selling open source, solutions based on open source. And that is to be able to give the development community a tool that they can use, so they don't have to have carry two different machines. I don't have to always have a Windows machine because my business requires it maybe, and a Mac for doing my development on, or something like that.
So it's for the developer community.
Yeah. Primarily the first out, this is really for the developers, yes.
But long run, I mean, if I'm gonna deploy a Linux application,
Where are you gonna?
I'm just gonna deploy it on Linux.
Sure, oh yeah.
You know, back when I heard that this thing was coming out, I was thinking all the user friendliness of Linux on with the stability of Windows. And, I mean, neither one of those things are all that great.
Well, I only half agree with you there, but.
Of course you do.
I think the idea though is, if you develop in Linux, Azure fully supports Linux. So you deploy it to a Linux instance in Azure,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everybody's happy. That's the idea. Because I think what, 25% of Azure's instances are Linux,
A
right?
third of them now.
Third of them, yeah.
Last I heard, the third of the workloads on Azure are Linux workloads. You go into the marketplace there and you see all the big names that are, selling solutions and have implementations of their solutions that you can very quickly spin up in Microsoft's cloud. All right, guys, this has been fun. Hope it's been good for you.
Quite interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
How big is a hard drive?